Now look, we love reversal stories. We love a good story of an underdog in the pits coming through to the throne of glory. It's what drives so much excitement in sport. The Leicester City coming through and winning the Premier League when no one expects it. The lowly Japan beating the mighty Ireland. Hopefully not Uruguay beating Wales. We love it in sport, but also it's in the plot line of so many reality shows. The Strictly factor. Oh, they had 2 left feet and look at them now. They've got a left and a right foot. It's the story engine that drives so much of the stuff that Simon Cowell is involved in with programs like The X Factor. Here is Dave, and Dave wants to be a megastar, and he's stacking shelves, and so Dave pursues his dream. And here's Dave singing in front of the judges, and he gets 4 yeses. And here's Dave in the judge's house, and he gets selected for the live studio finals. Here's Dave singing in the studio finals. Here is Dave amazingly winning the X Factor. Here is Dave releasing his first single. And here is Dave playing the local bingo hall because no one bought it. Apart from the last bit, we love the story of the underdog. We love the big reversal of situation. And if you've been around for the past couple of weeks, you'll see that is how God works in the world. So in the 2 weeks ago, we saw in chapter 1 that barren Hannah, who was mocked by Peninnah, was given a miracle baby. She goes from being ridiculed to rejoicing. And her experience in a small way highlights how God was going to provide saving leadership for his barren nation, Israel. You see, God is going to bring about a king who's going to bring rescue. But you've got to understand, the way God works is never how you would expect. We saw last week in chapter 2, verses 1 to 10. If you're around, if you weren't, go and listen to it. It's the absolute heartbeat of this book of 1 Samuel. It teaches you again and again about how God works in the world. And God is the God of reversals. God is the God who brings about salvation for his people through his king in the most unexpected way. Just have a look at 2 verse 9. Look what it says at the end of 2 verse 9. It is not by strength that one prevails. You see, God works in ways that we wouldn't work to bring glory to his name. See, God is the God of reversals. He takes from the pit to the throne, but also he works in judgment to take from the throne to the pit. And that is what we hit today. We meet God working in judgment. And actually, as he works in judgment, ironically, he works to save. See, we see God judging Israel's ungodly leadership. Shiloh is the heartbeat of all the action. Shiloh it should have been probably the happiest place in Israel, the safest place in Israel. It's where God's people went to the tabernacle to meet with him, to offer sacrifices, to have their sins forgiven, to have their sins atoned for. But this place was not safe. It was seedy. Have a look at chapter 1, verse 3. This is where we meet the 2 central characters. Year after year, this man and his wife, they went to worship and sacrifice to the Lord Almighty at Shiloh, where Hophni and Phinehas, the 2 sons of Eli, were priests of the Lord. And the question is, what sort of priests are they? Hophni and Phinehas, Hoph and Phin. Have a look at chapter 2, verse 12. Eli's sons were scoundrels. They had no regard for the Lord. See, what's gone wrong for these boys? Was it that they were gluttons? Well, they certainly were gluttons. Verse 13, have a look at it. Little number 13 on chapter 2. Now, it was the practice of the priests, i.e., this is what they did all the time. It wasn't just a one-off. This is what they did every time people came to sacrifice at Shiloh. What do they do? Whenever any of the people offered a sacrifice, the priest's servant would come with a 3-pronged fork in his hand. And while the meat was being boiled, he would plunge in the fork into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot. And whatever the fork brought up, the priest would take for himself. This is how they treated all the Israelites who came to Shiloh. So here are Hoff and Finn. They want food, and so they send their priest to go and do their dirty work. And he sticks in this big old fork, and he pulls out whatever meat he can, and they eat it. Now the question is, were they allowed to do that? No. No, they weren't. It's not rightfully theirs. Back in Leviticus chapter 7, we're not going to turn to it, but it tells us that for the Thanksgiving sacrifice, the people who were offering that sacrifice were meant to bring a breast and a leg for the priest to eat. See, they were always provided with food to eat at every offering. But for Hoff and Finn, they wanted their portions supersized. And so they wouldn't go and do this themselves. They would get someone to do their dirty work for them, their servant. But he would send them, go and get us a bit more, please. See, Hoff and Finn were gluttons. In fact, they were lazy gluttons. But they weren't just lazy gluttons. They were aggressively lazy gluttons. See, sometimes boiled meat wasn't enough for them. They wanted a bit of barbecue. So have a look at verse 15. But even before the fat was burned, the priest's servant would come and say to the people who are sacrificing, give the priest some meat to roast. He won't accept boiled meat from you, but only raw. If the person said to them, let the fat be burned first, and then take whatever you want. You see, the people there, they know that the fat was always meant to be for the Lord. Leviticus 3:16 says, all the fat is the Lord's. That was the pleasing aroma. The fat was always God's. But they were like, no. Verse 16, the servant was answered, no, hand it over now. If you don't, I'll take it by force. See, this was meant to be a place of peace, but it was a place of peril. This was meant to be a place of thanksgiving, but it was a place of threat. Hoff and Finn were happy to pick a fight with God. So was this the heart of Israel's leadership problem? Here they have their spiritual leaders, and they are aggressively lazy gluttons. That is a problem, but it's not the heart of the problem. Have a look at verse 22. Was this the heart of the problem? Now Eli, who was very old, heard about everything his sons were doing to all Israel and how they slept with the women who served at the entrance of the tent of meeting. It turns out these religious leaders were not just people who stole stuff they shouldn't steal, but they were also predators. They turned this place, which was meant to be a place of worship, into a brothel. Now, is that the heart of the problem in this leadership crisis? It is a problem, but it's not the heart of the problem. See, what is the heart of the problem that is driving all this? Have a look back at verse 12. Eli's sons were scoundrels, and they had no regard for the Lord. Literally, they did not know the Lord. See, they don't know him. Have a look at verse 17. The sin of the young men was very great in the Lord's sight, for they were treating the Lord's offering with contempt. The reason why they were treating the Lord's offering with contempt was because they were treating the Lord with contempt. Can you see what a dark place Israel was in? Their spiritual leaders, who are meant to be leading them, to God don't know him, don't care about him, don't actually think he listens or knows or cares what's going on in what at this point was the central place of worship. Now you could ask the question, do they know what they're meant to be doing? And it's absolutely clear they are culpable. They have no excuse. Have a look at verse 27. God sends a prophet to Eli, their dad. He's effectively the chief priest. And listen to what he says. This is what the Lord says. Did I not clearly reveal myself to your ancestors' family when they were in Egypt under Pharaoh? He says, look, you have all you need to know the Lord. You've got the scriptures. You know how he's worked in the past. You know your privileged position. It's been passed on and on and on. And yet Eli, Hophni and Phinehas have chosen to do nothing with that. They don't want to know the Lord. They don't want to serve the Lord's people in the way they should do. And so they commit these repulsive sins. I wonder, does that shock you? Does that shock you? It should do. It really should shock all of us. But it is all too familiar a tale. The religious scandal of the minister or the religious leader who used their high spiritual authority to abuse people who are in their care, to exploit them, maybe financially, maybe sexually, all because deep down they don't really know the Lord. See, what we have here is not the lapse of an otherwise godly leader, it's the habitual pattern of this leadership to exploit this people mercilessly. It happened in Israel 3,000 years ago. It happens today. It'll happen in the future. You know, there's a warning here for us about leaders. Our leaders, the outward appearance of the person you listen to on the God channel or the person you are tuning into on YouTube. Just be careful. What's their life like? How are they using their position of authority? See, these were the practices of the priests, and God sees it, and he won't tolerate it. So you can't treat God as you like. I don't know if you remember, this is 10 years ago. 10 years ago, when Obama became president of the United States, him and his wife came over in 2009 for a state visit. And Michelle Obama broke protocol number 1. Do you know what protocol number 1 is? You don't touch the Queen. You don't touch her. You really don't. But she put her hand around her and gave her a gentle squeeze. And you got to know, Michelle, you don't do that to the Queen. You may be the First Lady of the most important or the most powerful nation in the world, but you just don't mess with the Queen. So there's a lesson for you. If you meet the Queen and you feel like giving her a peck on the cheek, don't, because the beef eaters will take you down. You can't treat the Queen as you like. How much more so with God? You know, if you really know what God is like, you know, if you understand the means by which he has given for us to have a relationship with him. You know, for them it was the sacrificial system which ultimately pointed forward to the one perfect sacrifice, Jesus. We can't approach God on any other terms. You know, do you know God as Hannah does? Just have a look back at 2 verse 2. Look at how she describes him. There is no one holy like the Lord. There is no one morally perfect. There is no one who detests sin and will treat it justly. There is no one like our God. You see, the reality for Hoff and Finn is they'd ignored God's given word. They'd shrunk God down to a bigger version of them who maybe was just too busy to care about what they were doing in their position of leadership. And the moment you start shrinking God down to be a slightly bigger version of you, you'll think, I can approach him on my terms, when you can't. You know, as Philip was saying at the start of the service, the creator of 1 billion trillion stars in the sky, the holy, perfect one with all our sin, we just can't approach him on our terms. See, 2 verse 3, the Almighty, have a look at chapter 2 verse 3. Do not keep talking so proudly, or let the mouth speak such arrogance, for the Lord is a God who knows, and by him deeds are ways. Hoff and Phinehas, the Lord knows you. He weighs your deeds. He's found them wanting, and so he'll judge them. Now Dad steps in. Eli steps in with a warning. Did you see that back in verse 25? He pleads with his boys. And he says this in verse 25 of chapter 2. If one person sins against another, God may mediate for the offender. But if anyone sins against the Lord, who will intercede for them? Who will intercede for them? You know, if you choose to pick a fight with God and ignore the sacrificial system, the means by which you can be forgiven, Hophni and Phinehas, what hope is there for you? And verse 25, his sons don't listen to his father's rebuke, for it was the Lord's will to put them to death. You see, the judgment on these boys is final as they ignore God's sacrifice, as they ignore continually and make a mockery of the way they can be put right with him. There is no hope for them. It's the same for us. You know, if we live our lives continually ignoring the sacrifice that Christ has made to put us right with him, there's no hope. If someone once said to me that the only way someone goes to hell is by trampling over the cross of Jesus. See, if you trample and trample and trample, then what are you going to expect other than death? See, that is the case for these boys. God judges this ungodly leadership. But what about their dad, Eli? What about their dad? Do you think he is a goodie or a baddie in the story? What do you think? In verse 24, he tells his boys off. He rebukes them. My sons, this report is not good. Verse 20, he's really nice to Hannah when she comes up. I remember being on a conference a few years ago, and the main speaker was speaking about the book of 1 Samuel, and I had lunch with him, and we had a big argument as to whether Eli, where was he in all this? And I kept on saying, he's not that bad a bloke. And he kept on saying, no, Andy, look at this verse. And look at this verse. I was like, he's all right. He was like, no. Look what God says in this verse here. And I think he was probably right. You see, Eli, he's a nice bloke, but he is weak. And actually, that is not good enough. It's not good enough. See, God brings this special word of prophecy from 27 to 36 to Eli, and it is utterly devastating. Again, he reminds them, verse 27, they're a privileged family line. Verse 28, they are chosen out of all the tribes of Israel. Verse 28, they've been provided for, food from the offerings. And yet, look at 29. Why do you, if you have a look at the little e, and look at the bottom of the page, the Hebrew is plural. Why do you, that is Hophni and Phinehas and Eli, scorn my sacrifice and offering that I prescribed for my dwelling? Why do you, and I think this is singular, honor your sons more than me by fattening yourselves on the choice parts of every offering made by my people Israel. You see, Eli, he may not have been threatening people saying, I want your food. He may not have been joining them at the trying it on with the temple ladies. But he was benefiting from the barbecue. Do you see that? Do you see that? You are fattening yourself. Where do you think all that meat comes from, Eli? You know. You really do. And so his judgment is brutal. Verse 30b, far be it from me, those who honour me I will honour, but those who despise me will be disdained. At the start of verse 30, I promised that members of your family would minister before me forever. And then verse 31, the time is coming and I'll cut short your strength and the strength of your priestly house, so that no one will reach old age. You in your distress will see distress in my dwelling, although good will be done to Israel. No one in your family will ever reach old age. Every one of you that I do not cut off from serving at my altar, I will spare only to destroy your sight and sap your strength, and all your descendants will die in the prime of life. We will get there. 1 Samuel chapter 22. It is a brutal chapter where this is fulfilled. And I guess you could say, isn't this a bit harsh? He says, you are privileged, you are meant to be my priests forever, but that is going to stop because of the seriousness of your sin. But what you've got to understand is this. The sins of leaders have devastating consequences for the people. Can you imagine the hundreds of thousands of people who were going up to Shiloh all year round? It's disproportionate, the impact of what they are doing, as they are getting in the way of people's relationship with a holy God. You see, Eli's leadership is weak. He has given his boys a slapped wrist when he should have sacked them. And all along, he was benefiting from their sin. And so God takes sin so seriously. In fact, he cares for his people so much. Did you see that? In verse 32, you will see the distress in my dwelling, although good will be done to Israel. You see, his judgment on these leaders, it looks harsh on them, but it's because he loves his people. He wants them to be able to have a relationship with him, and so he knows and he sees their wickedness and he can't tolerate it and he won't tolerate it. He is the God who judges and brings reversal. You know, at the start of the chapter, Eli and Hophni and Phinehas are full to the brim of food. But did you see the reversal at the end, verse 36? Look at the reversal. Then everyone left in your family line will come, bow down before him for a piece of silver and a loaf of bread, and plead, appoint me to some priestly office so that I can have food to eat. Have we seen that before? Chapter 2, verse 5. Look at Hannah's prayer. Those who are full hire themselves out for food. See, God is teaching us here how he works in the world to save his people. And sometimes that will come through judgment. In fact, it will always come through judgment. Now, I don't know about you, but as I read about Eli, weakness with dealing with difficulty and sin, as I see Hophni and Phinehas and their exploiting of their positions of power, I don't know whether you see potential seeds of that in your heart. I think I'm capable of this. I'm sure you do. And I guess the question is, where is their hope? Where is their hope for people who can see a little bit of this in them? Verse 35. Have a look on. Here's the hope. Okay, I'm going to judge you and your boys, and actually your family are going to feel the consequence of that. But verse 35, I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who will do according to what is in my heart and mind. I will firmly establish his priestly house, and they will minister before me, my anointed one, always. He says, look, God says, look, I am going to raise up godly leadership to save. And this statement here, it will be partially fulfilled through Samuel. It will be partially fulfilled through Zadok, who comes later. But the problem with those priests is that in their heart and mind, they don't always do according to what the Lord says. And the other problem is they die. See, this is trailing the need for a priest who will live forever. And when we get to Hebrews chapter 4, we read of Jesus, the true high priest, who dies on the cross and God raises to live forever, to be our priest forever. Now, the question is, how does this story teach us about how God is going to provide this saving leadership? He's judging the ungodly, proud leadership. But how does he bring his saving leadership? Well, did you notice as we had the reading, trailing all the way through the story, he kept on popping his head up. It's like going down to the seaside. And I love the seaside here. I love the beaches, particularly, where's the one? Horsey Gap. Because as you look out to the sea, all of a sudden you see a little seal pop its head up. And you're like, look at the seal, girls. Then it pops its head back down. And you're looking out and you're looking. It pops its head up again. You think, come on, seal, come on out. We want to see you. And it pops it up and pops it down. That's what happens all the way through the passage with God's answer to the problem. Look at chapter 2, verse 11. Who do we meet? Elkanah went home to Ramah, but the boy ministered before the Lord. Who's the boy? He's Samuel. Chapter 2, verse 18. Who do we meet? But Samuel was ministering before the Lord. 2, verse 26. And the boy Samuel continued to grow in stature and favor. 3, verse 1, just at the end. The boy Samuel ministered before the Lord. If you'd been in Shiloh and you'd surveyed the absolute state of religious affairs, you'd have had to look really hard to see the little boy Samuel's head pop up and pop down and pop up and pop down again, because all this other stuff would have been distracting you. But yet, as the years and years went by, God has his little boy exactly where he wants him. He's the boy, verse 18, who's got a linen ephod. That is what priests wear. He's the boy, verse 19, whose mum lovingly every year makes him a little garment, just that little bit bigger. He's hit another growth spurt, a little bit bigger. A little bit bigger. He looks the part. He's growing up, verse 21, in the presence of the Lord. Hoff and Finn, they don't know the Lord. But here is one that he does. See, at this moment of national crisis, 25b, as the sons refuse to listen to the rebuke and their judgment on them is settled, they're going to be put to death. What happens at the midst of that national crisis? Verse 26. The boy Samuel continuing to grow in stature, in favor with the Lord and with the people. Now just think about that verse. Who does it remind you of? Who does it remind you of? I can hear some people going, it's Jesus. And the Sunday school answer is right. Turn to Luke chapter 2, verse 52. It's on page 1029. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. There we go. It's on page 1029. Luke chapter 2, verse 52. And look at what we read there. Have you got it? Luke chapter 2, verse 52. And Jesus grew in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. It's almost identical. You see, the message of the Bible is this, that God not only acts in corrupt Israel to provide the leadership it needs, but He's worked in this corrupted world to provide the leadership it needs. And if you are watching history, there's an awful lot of stuff going on, isn't there? And you would hardly notice Jesus Christ. You know, he's somewhere in history's background. His death note seems to be a footnote in the history of the world. His resurrection, an interesting story in the background. But if you think that, you will miss that he is the thing, that he's the big thing that God is doing. Keep your eyes on him. You know, as we continue to read through 1 Samuel, we'll find out that he is the shadow of the one to come. And yet so many people miss the heartbeat of what God is doing in the world. Jesus. He's the one that he has raised. He's the one who will save whoever will come to him. He's the one we need to look to.